today. Listen, if you blink, you are going to miss these crazy numbers with companies like especially OpenAI and Anthropic. And now listen, obviously we have the Google Geminis, the Copilots, the Groks of the world, but OpenAI and Anthropic are different in that they don't have, these giant cloud services. They don't have these giant legacy businesses that they're relying on like Google does, like Microsoft does. And yet, Jaeden, the numbers that you and I were just looking at before we came on air are unbelievable. And I've been kind of tracking along with Anthropic, like the ARR over the last, few months, how it's jumping. I keep thinking I'm misreading the numbers, but I don't think I am. So just to put this out there, Jaeden, the numbers that I'm seeing are, first of all, OpenAI just raised 8.3 billion, bringing its valuation to 300 billion. And that's insane.
Crazy.
But the other one that's almost more startling to me, and this is not confirmed yet, as far as I know, is that Anthropic's looking at raising another $5 billion to value it at 170 billion. Anthropic, which kind of tells you how important coding is. So listen, guys, if you are trying out these models, and Jaeden, as I throw it out over to you, make sure you're testing out all these models, because lest you think it's just all about ChatGPT or Copilot or Grok or whatever, just remember that you should be testing these out. The best way to do that, by the way, AIbox.ai. This is Jaden's company, which he is absolutely crushing it on, $19 a month. And you get access to all of these tools. So you can actually, my favorite thing about this is the side-by-side thing. Again, my colleague at AI Mindset, Robert, and I are constantly sort of saying like, okay, what does Gemini say? What does Claude say? What does Grok say? What does ChatGPT say? What does Copilot say? And we're constantly going back and forth. We pay probably $300, $400 a month easily for all these tools. I don't know how Jaeden does this, but I beg you, at least test this thing out, because you will not go back. Jaeden, on these numbers, because you were also telling me sort of user numbers as well, which I wasn't sure if they were public or not, or what. Tell me sort of like what you're seeing in both these with OpenAI and Anthropic.
Okay, yeah, you're right. There's so much going on here. And I think what I love to do is a lot of times you'll hear the announcement of basically the amount of money that's being raised, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. And then as soon as it's closed, you'll hear the announcement of some big milestone or feature or thing that's coming, or thing that's on the roadmap basically for the company.
Right.
And what's interesting is we hear it in that order, but the company is basically publishing it in reverse order, where they're going to investors saying, check out this new milestone we're about to hit, or this new feature, or this new roadmap thing that we have. We're going to raise money. And they basically raised it based off of that, but we find out about it after the money's raised. It's funny, we hear it in reverse order. So we've all heard about these numbers. The crazy thing that ChatGPT has said is that they are on track to reach about 700 million weekly users. This is insane. Earlier, they reached 500 million weekly active users at the end of March. So since March, it's so funny because it's like, 500 million, 700 million. What's the difference? It's like, what's the difference? 500
So
to
right.
7 since March, like a handful of months ago. And
It's
we're
so
up
right.
another
It's so
200
right.
million. Like, this is growing crazy.
It's really wild. I love that you call that out, because it's true. It's like, oh, up to 5. No, man, that's an insane amount, especially when you think about the global reach of this. Because Jaeden, Pew Research just came out with something, I don't know when it was, maybe 2 weeks ago, that said 2/3 of Americans almost like don't use it. Like they have used it before, but they don't really use it on any kind of regular basis. And something like 20% of Americans just have never like heard of ChatGPT or something like that. So when you think about 700 million, I mean, that is a chunk of the global population. That's why I'm trying to like figure this out. But also just the jump in ARR and sort of like annualized revenue for both these companies is extraordinary. And I just keep wanting to put this in perspective. Jane, do you remember in early 2024, you and I were talking about Anthropic, because Anthropic was making projections, and I think their projection was, if I have it, I'm kind of pulling this out of the air, but they thought that they'd make something like 800 million by the end of the year, and we were like, there's no way they're making 800 million. Now, what they knew that we didn't know was Claude Code, right? I mean, like we were sort of just seeing this as like, oh, this is great. It's a safer model. It has a bigger, remember in the beginning, safer model, bigger context window. And then when Opus came out, and I think that was spring 2024, I might have that wrong. That was, for me, I've always talked about a couple of jaw-dropping moments for me. That was one of 3 jaw-dropping moments for me. The first one was ChatGPT, second one, Notebook LM, not in order here. And then the third one was on Opus, Claude Opus, or whatever it was, Claude 3. Imitated my voice so unbelievably uncannily that Claude has continued to do that. And so I think these numbers that Claude is sort of like riding this rocket ship on have to be code, right? I mean, was that your experience with when what you're doing with AI Box as well?
Oh yeah, 100%. Claude Code is absolutely crazy. So I'm actually quite happy that it's like the model found its own little niche and it carved it out with developers so that even though it's not like the number one model everyone thinks about when they ask it questions, it has like a huge user base. And
Yeah.
here's one really interesting thing to think about. Right now, we think about software and products in weekly user metrics, basically, right? So we're like, oh my gosh, OpenAI just hit 700 million weekly users, or monthly users is more common, but we'll say weekly because they're crushing it. I'm sure it's even more monthly, or
Mhm.
maybe it isn't more that much more monthly, so they say
Oh,
weekly, so it sounds
that's
extra
interesting. That's
exciting.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great metric. In any case, this is how we kind of measure things. How many active users are there? I think we're going to get to a point with these AI models where you kind of see with Zuckerberg, for example, it feels like he's like a little bit, I don't want to say deflated, but like it's not as exciting for Zuckerberg to, he never talks about how many users are using his apps anymore because it's like, well, he kind of hit market saturation basically, right? Like he's got like billions of users and it's really hard to grow any bigger than it already is. It basically everybody knows about it, they want to use it or they don't want to use it. Okay, so it feels like for social media platforms and everything else we
Right.
talked about how many users. I think we're going to get to a point where we're going to start talking about usage as the main metric, right? So right now it's
Mm.
like OpenAI hit 700 million weekly users. Well, pretty soon it's going to be is many people as can use it will use it. I think they're
Right.
going to hit market saturation at some point. Like with these numbers, 700 million, right? There's only a couple billion. There's only a handful of billion people on the planet, so there's only so many people. At some point, it's going to be like, okay, 700 million, but now it's like there's going to be like 10 million people's worth of hours used. I don't know what the exact measurement is. That's not a good one, but basically
Mm.
people are going to be using it more and more, and the company becomes more valuable. So in the case of Anthropic, like if you looked at how many users Anthropic has, way less than OpenAI, but the usage of the developers, they're using it like 100 times more compute out of it than OpenAI, and they're paying for all that compute, and it's worth it. So Anthropic is basically able to be like a company with 100x or 25x as many users because the usage is so high. I think OpenAI will get to the same points where it feels like, oh, they can only raise so much money before they reach a market saturation. I don't think that they will ever hit that because it's going to be usage based, and the next phase is robots, and robots are going to get ChatGPT, and then maybe it's going to be all the self-driving cars. They're going to make a deal to try to get
Right.
ChatGPT
Right.
to, or like other technologies. We're going to start sticking their AI into these other technologies using more and more compute. I think robots will probably be the big one. And it's going to be like, okay, weekly active users, maybe this will be it. Weekly active users won't be humans. They'll be humans plus robots. So they're like, we have 10
Right.
billion
Right.
weekly active
That's
users of
interesting.
ChatGPT if you count all of our robots. They use it just as much as a human. And so it's usage based. It's going to be interesting.
That's yeah. Actually, that is really interesting. I now think about that because remember with like what Zuckerberg was saying was like we have like 600 million users, and we're like, no, dude, like that's just because like people go into Instagram and
Right.
they type in a anything and they're like, oh, you're using it like it's not. It's
Right.
just a
You
search bar.
cannot argue that that is worth what
It's
OpenAI's users are worth.
it's sort of like when WhatsApp when they started to build things into WhatsApp, right? Also owned by Zuck, right? And like also owned by Meta. And it's one of these things where it's almost more annoying, I mean, like and it's always one of these things where, in fairness, and I want to be fair to Meta as well, when these ideas come out. I'm never sure, like maybe it'll be great, maybe sort of like having an AI companion on WhatsApp will be great. I tested it out a few times. I'm like, but that's not where I need it. I'm chatting with my friends. I don't need AI in that moment. But the other thing about usage made me think about character AI, and I remember these statistics, and I was just double checking them now. Character AI, for example, 200 million active like monthly users, but the amount of time that they spend on it, they use it like 8 or 10 times a day for like 12 to 17 minutes each. Basically, it's something like somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours a day people are spending on character AI. So that is the metric that I think people really care about. And to your point about Claude, if you're coding, you're just hanging out on there. Do you know what I mean? It's not like
Yep.
a ChatGPT where you sort of like bop in and bop out, right? That's sort of like that's why I think the usage thing is an interesting metric. Yeah.
Yep, 100%. Okay, I have to tell you one last crazy twist on this whole investment story from OpenAI, and that is who put money in, right? Another $8 billion, that's a lot of money. Who put the money in? This is crazy. Connor, have you ever heard of the Dragoneer Investment Group?
I have not. It sounds like Mouseketeer, like the dark version of like the Mouseketeers. But go on. No.
So what's crazy to me is we have a lot of like people you'd expect. You got Andreessen Horowitz, you got Sequoia
Coatue,
Capital,
yeah,
Tiger
Coatue
Global Founders
Capital,
Fund,
yeah,
Fidelity Management, all the people you'd
Tiger, yeah.
expect coming in on this massive round. The round was actually led by none of those. The round was led by
Yeah, what is
Dragoneer
this?
Investment Group. This is a quote unquote under the radar investor. Who it
Sketchy.
is? Great question. They led the round with a $2.8 billion check. Crazy.
How? I don't even get that.
And so
We have no idea who
a
they are.
hilarious thing, if you go and search for Dragoneer Investment Group, they have 2 reviews on Google. So evidently, some of their investors really like them. If you go to their website, super opaque. It just basically says partnering with exceptional global or exceptional businesses globally. I'd be curious if people are going to do more digging, and maybe you and I will do more digging on this after the fact. But I have been seeing, to be 100% honest, on a lot of these AI companies as they're doing these bigger and bigger, like sort of crazy rounds, the money is not always coming from the most traditional sources. It's coming from random investor that you never heard of, or a lot of times like a Google or an Anthropic will put in like an insane amount of money from like a big, huge company, and that's kind of understandable. But it's fascinating. Like these rounds are getting so big, it's going to be like sovereign wealth funds that have to put the money in, governments have to put the money in.
That's who
Yeah,
does it now, though.
very, very
It's now
interesting.
it's all like Brunei. In fact, I might have this wrong. So giant caveat, because I only heard this. I'm not sure if this is right. So don't take me. I know we're on a podcast here, but I thought I heard that Dario Amodei of Anthropic was starting to relax their thing around sort of like taking foreign money, especially sort of like, to be told frank, like Middle Eastern money and stuff like this. Like I know in the
Yep.
beginning they're very careful about it. I think they might be relaxing that. Giant think, giant might, all that kind of stuff, doing your own research. But that's because that's where the money is. I mean, basically, like the Qatari government can put whatever they want in here, and at this point, at these rates, you have to invest a huge amount to get your money back. Like it's
Yep.
this is what you have to do. So anyway, so it's fascinating. Dragoneer. Okay, we'll track that one. We'll track that one carefully. But great story, huge story. I love to see Anthropic doing really well. By the way, stay tuned because we don't know exactly when it's not going to drop today, this podcast. So GPT-5 is coming out soon. They're going to be testing coding on that too, Jaeden. So I'll be waiting anxiously for your reviews on that too. Anyway, close this out here.
Then. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. We will catch you all in the next episode. And as always, the number one thing that would really help our podcast out, basically, is if you could leave a review or a rating of the podcast, pretty much wherever you get it. If you're listening over on Apple, leave a little review. We'll read them all, and we absolutely appreciate them. If you're on Spotify, you hit the About tab. If you've been listening to this for the last few weeks, you haven't left a review, this is your sign, please. It really helps the podcast out a ton. We appreciate you all. We will cry tears of joy when we see the review. So go ahead and leave that if you wouldn't mind. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.